This is Jitain, founder of Jupiter. This is the digital banking experience which we are going to launch very soon in India market. The whole idea of launching this was that when I was sort of asking this question to many people that why does nobody recommends their bank, and the surprising answers came in when I started asking this question. While you see the apps like Swiggy, Zomato, Amazon, and all of those apps getting recommended by consumers, but when it comes to your bank account, nobody recommends, and everybody's feedback is like you can open your account anywhere. Is the same thing, doesn't matter. So and then we looked further into the reasons, and we realized that there are three key reasons why people have this feeling of not recommending their bank. So one was, we found out that there's absolutely no delight when you interact with your bank account. It's the same mundane banking experience. You do transfers, you log in, you check your balance, you check your transaction history, but nothing beyond. So the whole experience which you go through, I keep saying this, both inside the company and outside that, banks build this experience more as a branch banking experience ported to mobile, where the way you see in the branch the counters, on the mobile also you see the menus and then sub menus, and you have to sort of go pick up your service. You have to choose what you want to do, and you have to be intelligent enough to know that where a particular option is, and the decision making you have to do on your own. So there is no intelligence around your bank account. And the last thing is, when I have to think of the service or customer service. Let's say if I have some issue, if I have to think of calling my bank, I really get scared. I don't think so. I am at all comfortable where I have to call my call center agent and get my query resolved. That means I have to allocate half an hour of my day. And I think these were the things which led us to thinking that what should we do to solve this problem. And that's how this whole idea of Jupiter came in. So Jupiter as a company, as a banking experience, we want to make it very, very smart. We want to make it transparent when it comes to dealing with consumers. We want to make it experience more personalized, where it can understand where in your financial life cycle you stand, and how can we bridge the expectation, keeping in mind where you are in your financial journeys or what are your goals. And we want to make the experience more rewarding. And I think these are the three key things which we really want to solve when it comes to Jupiter banking experience. If you look at it, like today, as a consumer, when I look at my whole finances, somehow my bank account never links to my overall finances. And this is where we started thinking that why there is no single experience of banking plus finance intelligently integrated. And we started digging into it, and when I asked many bankers that why don't you guys do this, and I got interesting answers. And I'm not bashing banks here, but I got a very interesting answer from very senior bankers that consumers don't have a choice. So all banks are same, so what are they going to do? They're not, even if they move to other bank, it doesn't matter, they're going to get the same experience. And this was like very alarming, and this was like very, very surprising answers. And this was not just one banker, this was like almost all the bankers gave me the same reward. And I'm like, I think this is where I see the opportunity. We got to figure out what consumers really need. We got to figure out what are the gaps which consumers have today in their banking experience, and can we solve that. And this is where we went ahead and took a very, very different approach while building Jupiter. So we created a Jupiter community. And the whole like this is like I see a first of its kind approach in a market like India, where we are sort of banking very, very heavily on the community to co-create this experience. We really want to listen what consumers want from their banking experience. We want to listen in terms of what is that the gaps which they're seeing. Like today, if I want to give any feedback to my bank, it just goes into the deaf ears. Nobody is there to listen. No PM is there to listen your feedback. And this is where we said that every idea which comes from consumers on Jupiter Community matters. We want to listen to every idea. We want to close the loop about every idea in terms of what are the features we are immediately taking up, what are the features we are parking for later because of our bandwidth, and what are the things which we have considered and in terms we have debated and felt that those features are not needed. And I think that's the part which we want to address. And I'm really glad to see that I can see like close to 300 participants, and I'm assuming all most of you are Jupiter community members. So I'm really glad that all of you are have joined and are contributing to development of Jupiter. So like just to give a very quick background on who all are community folks. So we see like most of our community folks are tech evangelists, all finance geeks, product managers, product designers, the young tech folks. And I think we are like really learning a lot from you guys. And I want to personally thank you guys in contributing to what we are building. And I feel like really proud in creating this co-created experience, which is first of its kind in this country. And I look forward to your support. Now coming back to today's agenda, I think today I'm hosting a very special guest, David. And David is founder of Nubank. In fact, there is an interesting story around this. So, first time I never knew about this concept of neobanks and digital only banks and all of that. And 2016 was when I heard first time about Nubank, and I got so intrigued that I somehow reached out to David and said that I want to sort of see what you're doing, how you're doing different, and I want to learn from you. And David was very kind enough to tell me everything about his journey, tell me everything about how he built it, where the gaps he saw. And I got so fascinated that I actually that was my inspiration to consider of starting Jupiter. So today's guest is very special for me. The another reason why David is special for me is he is the early backer of Jupiter as well. So I think that gives me an immense proud that David not only has been successful founder, but he also is an early believer of Jupiter story. But just to quick introduce you, David, to our community members. So David is founder and CEO of Nubank, the largest independent digital bank in the world. In fact, the Nubank's users are bigger than or more than all the neobanks combined in the world. So that's like an amazing feat David and his team has achieved. Before starting Nubank, David was partner at Sequoia Capital in Latin American investments. And before Sequoia, he was an investment banker and in the growth equity side at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and General Atlantic Group. David has a Bachelor of Science in Management Science and Engineering from Stanford University. He is apparently also an MBA from Stanford University. So welcome, David, for this session. And all of us are like very excited to start the session.
Thank you, Jitendra, for the invite. Very excited to be here virtually with all of you. I wish I was there in India, physically delighting with some of the amazing food that you have. I'm a big fan of India. I was there about a year and a half ago. And anyway, very excited to be here with you all.
Thanks, David. So, David, I think while you are very famous here in this part of the world, but apparently not many people know the origin of Nubank and what motivated you to start Nubank. And you were partner at Sequoia Capital, which is I think was a very apparently cushy job in my view, and an exciting job. So what led you to start the new bank?
Well, listen, I would categorize the first 30 years of my life as a being of a frustrated entrepreneur. All I wanted to do in those first 3 days was start a business. I come from a family. I'm originally from Colombia. Come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad has, these are big families like in India sometimes. My dad has 12 siblings. All of them were entrepreneurs, including my dad, small businesses. My dad had a factory of, of buttons for pants.
Okay.
My mom's side, they were entrepreneurs as well. And so anyway, I grew up in that environment where all I heard day and night growing up was you have to start your own business, you have to do your own path, you have to be your own boss. Um, and so that was always the idea, that was always the dream. I went to college, as you mentioned, to study engineer, trying to figure out if in Silicon Valley I was going to have a great idea. That didn't end up, that didn't show up. I had no idea how to even begin or where to even begin. So ended up taking a bit of the more traditional financial services route, doing banking, doing private equity. Uh, Great jobs. I learned a lot. I had great mentors. Learned about a lot of different financial services and sectors. Learn a lot about what makes a great company, especially when I was able to spend time with a firm like Sequoia. What's a great idea? What's a great team? How do you set up the first pieces of a plan? What are the key questions to be asking in the early stage? So that investor view I thought was very valuable for entrepreneur, because ultimately when you are an entrepreneur, you're doing the most important investment of your life. As an investor at Sequoia, you're investing a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, a little bit of money there. If one of the investments works out, you're golden. As an entrepreneur, you're all in, right? You're putting everything you got in one. You had no diversification. You're fully focused, and you better get that right. And
Absolutely.
so the entrepreneur is the ultimate investor. And so I thought that vision of investor was very helpful. And anyway, being at Sequoia was a great job. I learned a lot from, but after 2 years there, I felt deeply that I just didn't really want to do investing anymore. That the time for me to go out and build something had finally arrived. Um, since I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, I always felt a bit jealous of the entrepreneur on the other side of the table. Here I was sitting, listening to entrepreneur, talking about how he or her were going to build their businesses, excited. And here I was on the other side of the table saying, go do it. Here you go, some money. It was too easy. Being an investor is too easy. Being an entrepreneur is the challenging
Right.
part, is the exciting part. You get your hands dirty. You're actually building it. And I wanted to build it. I wanted to be in that seat of the entrepreneur, making it happen. So ultimately, after 32 years, I said, "This is my moment," and it was an easy decision at that point.
So David, in our community, there are a lot of young entrepreneurs, there are a lot of product designers, aspiring entrepreneurs. So I think one of the questions which keep coming to us is like, how did you go about getting first 1,000 users? And I think I'm going into very specifics of Nubank journey, but this is the question which is on almost every entrepreneur's mind who's starting. So like, how did you personally go about it?
Sure. So we started with a very clear goal, uh, which was going to be our key differentiator, which was we're going to build the most consumer-centric bank in the world. Because we saw an industry in financial services that was very much concentrated, was a big oligopoly. We had 5 banks in Brazil that own 90% of everything. When you have such a concentrated oligopoly, where the 5 banks make so much money, they just couldn't care less about the customer. They don't really compete with each other. And that means the experience end up deteriorating significantly. When I moved to Brazil, I felt that pain firsthand. I had to go and open a bank account. And I always tell the story that I had to go into that banking branch and had to leave my backpack with my laptop in a locker outside the branch, and had to go to a bulletproof door where there were two armed guards with guns looking at me like a criminal. I forgot to put my keys in the locker, so the alarm started sounding. I was blocked in that door. Then I had to go out, leave my keys in the locker, come back in, wait 30 minutes, talk to a banking manager that did not want to be there to serve me. And anyway, I won't bore you with more details, but it was a process of like 5 months where I had to go to the bank branch again and again and again and again, to eventually opening a bank account that charged me $20 per month for a simple bank account, credit card that had over 500% interest rates with over $100 in fees per year. And so I just couldn't understand how the experience for the customer could be so bad. How could anybody uh, take that? And the answer was, again, there was no competition. It was a big oligopoly. So when we understood the opportunity, we decided that the big differentiation was we'll build the most consumer-centric bank in the world. And with that, we went backwards and build all Nubank strategy based on that. So partly was we built a team thinking about that goal. So big decisions like customer service. In Brazil, all banks have customer service outsourced. Traditionally, customer service is thought as a cost that banks need to minimize. We said, forget it. This is not a cost. This is a source of revenue. The best marketing we can have is happy customers, is customers talking to our customer service team and us being really able to help. So we decided not to outsource customer service. It was all in-source. I was taking phone calls from customers in my smartphone at 2 a.m. in the morning. My co-founder was also doing that for a very long time. So that was one decision. There were many decisions. To build a great product, you cannot outsource technology. If you're a technology company, you want to build a great product. So we built everything in-house. We had our own engineers, we had our product managers, designers. We really wanted to control the entire experience, make sure it was a magical experience. Part of the experience also was we were able not to charge any fees. Why? Because we had no banking branches. We're a full digital bank,
Right.
which meant we had lower cost, and we were going to pass that efficiency to the end consumer. So by the time we get to the first 1,000 customers, answering to your question, we had designed an experience that was very limited. It was just a physical credit card that you could apply for the card fully on your smartphone, and it was a credit card that you could control fully on your digital app, and that had no fees. It was a very limited experience, but the few things we did them really well. It's a very, very good, very well programmed experience, especially when you compare it with anything else that was in the market, which was that offline banking branch experience. And so once we had the product, we launched it with friends and family. The first 12 customers were us, with our employees. We had 12 people when we launched that first product. It took us about a year to build it. And we started growing through friends and family like that. And then suddenly, as we started making some marketing, some press, we started seeing some virality happening, which was something that we never expected for a financial services product. People were so excited about using a different card. Even we tried so hard to build a very differentiated experience, beginning with the color, right? One of the questions we asked initially is, what is the craziest color we can possibly imagine for a financial services brand? Somebody mentioned purple, and purple it was. We picked a very purple color card. When people saw that in 2013 in Brazil, they hated it. People either loved it or hated it. They felt really strongly about it, which meant good. We want a reaction. We want people to wake up from that sort of lethargic state of being owned by the banks. And so that combination of the product, the early phases of the brand, the customer service, a differentiated color, started creating a word of mouth growth. And those first 1,000 customers allowed it to then grow from there, almost all fully virally.
Interesting. No, I think very interesting point you made around customer service and the color. So coincidentally, in while building Jupiter, we were having exactly same question that what should be the color, and the color we chose is space fire. Now that's the color which people ask, what is space fire? And I think if you look at our website, that's the color which immediately gets noticeable by any consumer. So no, I
Nice.
can totally relate what you're saying about the purple color.
But by the way, I never asked you this question. Why Jupiter?
Jupiter is the largest planet in solar system, and like you have an aspiration of making largest bank, we have an aspiration of making largest financial services platform for young consumers. So we said it should resonate with that. And second, Jupiter in astrology, and Indians strongly believe in astrology. So Jupiter is a planet for wealth and prosperity. So if you get Jupiter planet in your star alignment, then you are bound to get wealthy. So that's what we want to make people wealthy.
Ah, that's great. That's a great name. That's a great name. Makes
So
total sense.
yeah, so that's interesting. So David, moving on next. So you started your journey with credit card, and then you moved on to saving account proposition after 3 years of journey. And
Yep.
what were you thinking that from credit card to saving account journey? Because it's a very different proposition, like building from credit to liabilities business. And like, what were the
Yes.
challenges you saw? But before that, what went into that thinking that this is the right time to launch a liabilities business like saving account?
Sure. Yeah. So we we knew that the end goal was always a full digital bank, a fully diversified platform. Um, and then when that's the goal, then as you mentioned, there are a couple of potential points where you can begin. And if you look at most of the neobanks in Europe and the US, they did start with a debit account, with a savings account. We are, I think, one of the few ones, if not the only one, that started with a credit card. There, we actually followed a bit of the path of maybe one of the earliest, let's call it fintech, which was Capital One in the US.
Hmm.
And then after that, another company we looked at very closely was Tinkoff in Russia.
Right.
Both Capital One and Tinkoff started with credit card. And when you think about credit card, it has a lot of advantages versus debit card. The first one is, as a new brand, it's just easier to grow when you give people money than when you take people's money.
Hmm.
Because when you are out there, I'm a new brand, give me your money, people are going to say, who are you? Where are you? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with my money? You don't have a branch. I think things have changed now that digital financial services is more common, but definitely in 2012, there was no fintech, there was no digitalization.
Right.
It was all offline branches. So in a world of offline branches, if you're a new brand and said, give me your money in all digital and there's no branch, it's very risky. If you, on the other hand, if you're just giving people money, there's no real risk for the consumer. You're taking all the risk as an institution. Here you go, my credit card with a line, use it and please pay. So that means growing and breaking consumer friction is easier on credit than on savings. The second advantage of that of credit is we think one of the big differentiation in the long run for all digital banks is going to be around credit, the ability to use data to underwrite credit. If you think about debit, there is no real barriers to debit. There are no real entry. There is no real business model. And even in India, yeah, with UPI has and in other markets as well, the digital payments have grown so quickly that the debit interchange and the debit economics are effectively zero today. Credit is not going to be cannibalized or commoditized that quickly. Credit is actually hard. You need a lot of data to underwrite well. In a market like Brazil, where you have very high interest rates, there is a big opportunity to use better data to decrease cost of interest rates and be able to price risk better. So if that was one of the long-term differentiations, we wanted to start building the muscle early on. And that's why starting with credit card was a good advantage. The culture of a credit, the culture on credit is very different than the culture on debit.
Right.
In a debit world, which is closer to the internet world, you want to grow at all costs. In the credit world, you have to be patient, you have to test, you
Yeah.
have to iterate, If you grow too fast, you're dead, right? You need to time. Your models need time to learn, and no matter how much money you have, you cannot accelerate time. You have to just be patient and learn a lot. So credit card allows us to start learning earlier and building the culture and the skill set. The other advantage is the credit card is a very information rich product. You can see what customers are doing with the card, where they're spending their money, if they're going internationally, if they're paying locally, if they're using Uber, if they're using Netflix. You could say, well, I'll start building a digital bank via lending product, a consumer loan. In that end, you're giving somebody cash. You have no idea what they're doing with that cash.
Yeah.
So there is no real data. In credit card, you know specifically what the data means. And you can begin with low credit limits. And as you get more data, you can do what in Capital One do, low and grow. You can start increasing credit limits as you get to know the customer better. So we saw a lot of advantages in credit versus debit. What are the disadvantages? There are big disadvantages. If you do credit wrong, you're dead. It's a higher risk strategy than debit, especially in markets like ours, emerging markets. It's very risky to be giving credit because there's a lot of macro moves. Access to data is hard initially. So you have to be very careful to start with credit, especially grow fast with credit. It's just way riskier. The other big disadvantage of credit is you need funding. You need debt funding. In debit, you don't need any funding.
Right.
So it's just fundamentally harder to begin with credit than with debit. You got to go find debt funding. That's not easy, especially markets like ours. There are ups and downs. That was one of the hardest things we had to do was finding debt funding initially. Brazil, as we were starting to scale, Brazil went into a really deep economic recession. So it was just very, very hard to figure out how to fund the portfolio and how to grow without increasing losses too much. So that was the decision behind First Credit. We're very happy that we chose that path, but it's definitely not the easiest path. But I would say it's the most defensible path from competition. How do we got ready to launch savings? Part of the bottleneck was we needed a license, a banking license. It was going to take us years to get it. It took us 3 years to get a banking license. So even if we had decided to start with savings, we couldn't. It wasn't even an option. We could have done some agreements with banks, but it would have been a very clunky structure. So we started with credit, but in parallel, we asked for a banking license, and we had to go through all the hoops to get that. Eventually, we got it. The other big part is we needed to build a brand that consumers trusted. And break through all that friction and the distrust from a lot of customers of putting their money with us. And we use the credit card as the Trojan horse into building that trust. Once we were able to launch credit and build a phenomenal brand, an NPS of 88, a full viral community, a full growth of MGM, and do that with millions of customers for 3-4 years, then we got to a point where customers were ready to deposit their money with us and trusted with their money. And so that happened maybe around year 3, year 4. That's when we launched the savings account. And the migration has been very successful. Now we have more savings customers than credit customers.
Wow.
And we have more funding today than we know what to do with, honestly, on the lending portfolio.
Oh, wow. That's a good situation to be in. So when you launch credit card initially, and you said that there were 5 banks who had oligopoly situation. So how did they react? Because it's very natural that somebody tries to disrupt big elephant, they would react either like trying to press you down or spend more marketing money or do something which hampers your business. So how did those guys react? Did they launch similar products? Did they slash fees? And did they catch up? Like, what was the reaction?
There's a great phrase we have in our headquarters that is being attributed to Gandhi. I don't know if it's true, but it's being attributed to him, which is first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they invite you, then you win. And that was precisely the stages that we saw happening.
Wow.
For the first 2 years, completely ignored. They didn't even know that we were around. And we try to be we try to remain ignored. We try to not make a lot of noise. Being ignored is a great advantage.
Yeah.
You wanna run as fast as you can without anybody noticing. That's the advantages of a startup versus a big bank. You can go fast, you can move fast, build your brand, and don't let them see you. Once they start slowly hearing about you, then they said, "Oh, that's so funny. A small little startup tried to compete with us, the biggest banks, the biggest companies in Brazil."
Right.
And then he was just laughing and then saying, "Your business model is never going to work. You cannot make money just with a credit card, especially if you charge no fees. Your credit losses are going to be too high. You're going to need funding." Um, anyway, the big list of arguments around why you're going to fail and why your strategy makes no sense. Customers are never going to trust a digital bank. They need branches. Customers want to go to a banking branch and have the coffee with the banking manager. All those arguments of conventional wisdom that they've been surrounded by for so many decades. Then eventually, let's say in the past 2 years, some of them, not all of them, started to really fighting. They went, let's say, from the top 5 banks, um, 3 are private, 2 are publicly owned. The best of the private ones started, okay, maybe these guys are doing something that makes sense. And the world start changing, and then you start hearing about fintech and you start hearing about tech. So about 2 years, the 2 private banks started to really compete with us. And they chose different paths. One decided to create a fully different digital bank separated from their main bank with a different brand. That was one strategy. The other 2 have really remained with the same brand and have been trying to improve their app and trying to improve their digital and building a better app and building a better website. But after 2 or 3 years of them seeing them fighting through that, um, what you can actually show is very little. And today we have something like 85% market share of the digital banking market in Brazil.
Wow.
After them have spent 3 years, hundreds of millions of dollars of competing and marketing and TV and paying McKinsey millions of dollars to build their digital strategy. Very little to show for, because ultimately they think what they really are doing is improving their app and their websites. But what they really need to be doing is changing the entire culture of the company, is
Yeah.
rethinking themselves completely. Their approach is they are the blockbuster will building a website. They're not the Netflix. They are the Barnes and Noble building a website. They're not the Amazon. They are the taxi driver building an app. They're not the Uber, right? Their analysis goes as far as we need to improve our app to compete, but they don't understand or they don't want to go through the headache of changing the entire company culture. And by the way, changing their company culture means probably letting go 50% of the headcount that they have and bringing a complete new different type of people. And it probably also means for all the CEOs of a lot of these banks realizing that they need to fire themselves and they need to bring new blood, which they're never going to do. They're never going to arrive to that conclusion. So so anyway, that's in the phase we're in. We're in the fight. Hopefully we'll get to the then you win. We are not there yet. There is a lot that we need to we still do. We still have a small portfolio of products. We need to grow that portfolio of products. There's probably 5-10 years ahead to be able to say we won. By no means I would say we've gotten to that stage yet. And these are companies that have a lot of capital and have a lot of talent, so they're gonna continue to keep trying. But anyway, that's where we are right now.
Interesting. So, there are many, actually, there are few current bankers and ex-bankers as well listening to you right now. So you are really scaring them. So,
That's great to hear that they are in this call.
so one of the thing, David, like whenever you do a startup, not everything works your way. You obviously make few mistakes and some things go unanticipated. So is there any one thing where you realize that you did not listen to user feedback and you failed miserably? Like any one incident you can quote?
Yeah, no, there be many. So, for example, in the early days, we thought our early adopters were going to be university students because we imagine they're going to be early adopters, they're in the university, they're young. We spent a lot of time trying to sell the product in that demographic, and it didn't work out. They just didn't care. University students didn't care. They had their car from their parents. They just didn't care. But then suddenly, after we started growing, we felt the pull from certain niches we never imagined. Early adopters in, let's say, the engineer communities, the startup communities, the design community, some niches around that saw the product and they were the first early adopters, and they started to pull and wanted to get the product. So we were wrong on that first assumption. One product that we've also failed to really scale, and it's been, we really haven't been successful at it, is our rewards program. We launched our rewards program. It took us about a year and a half to build it. We launched it. Today, it hasn't really picked up, and I think we still are trying to understand what we missed there. Partly, I think, was there were a couple of dimensions that users used to define what a great product was and what not a great product was. Initially, very much focused on travel. We tried too hard to reinvent the program and change consumer behavior. And so our value proposition had nothing to do with travel. And even in travel categories, the redemption wasn't great. And when we launched the product, the first impression was very negative. And it's been very hard for us to get out of that hole. Even though now we have better offers on that, the consumer perception is that Nubank doesn't have a great rewards product.
Mm,
Um, Even though when consumers use the product, they loved it, but we haven't been able to change the perception and the product marketing around that. So there, I think we tried too hard to change consumer behavior, to reinvent a bit the experience away from where consumers believed where value was. That being said, I struggle a little bit. I struggle a lot of the questions because it's a bit of the, if you always listen to customers, is what Henry Ford used to say. If I had listened to my customers, I would have built a faster horse.
right.
If you just listen to your customers, to what they want to do, they're going to tell you what they think they want, not what they really want. Sometimes consumers are not really able to articulate what they want. So you shouldn't really listen to what they tell you that they want. You should be listening what their problems are, and then figure out if there are better ways to solve the problems.
Very
And I think
interesting.
that's the approach. That's the Apple approach. That's the approach that we tend to try to take, even in this rewards example. That's the approach we try to take. The easiest thing would have been to launch the flyer rewards program, and maybe would have gotten a better take up. And by doing something very different, we failed, and we didn't really fix the problem. But over the long run, making decisions, I think listening more to problems rather than to what the customer is actually really saying, I think might be a better approach.
Interesting. No, no, actually, that's so true. And Steve Jobs used to say this. I'm not sure whether every product manager has a vision like Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs used to say this, that the customers don't know what they want, and that's where I must say that is true in many circumstances. So moving on, David. Like at this stage, what are your North Star metrics you track in the business?
Um, Basically, two main ones. The first one is growth. Uh, we need to be impactful to get to where we want to get. We need to be large in number of customer count. So growth, and related to that, NPS, Net Promoter Score.
Interesting.
So what we're saying is we want to grow while maintaining a very, very, very high levels of consumer experience. And in fact, the reason why we have that consumer experience is what gives us more growth. So there is the concept of this flywheel that Amazon talks a lot about where better customer experience brings our customers, more customers allows us to build better products, it gives us more data, which allows us to build a better customer experience. And you have this never-ending flywheel. So we focus really on those two metrics, but underneath there is a tree of our metrics that drive either that growth or that drive that NPS. And there are also a number of early indicators, such as virality rate, MGM growth, customer service levels, level of infrastructure, level of app. There is a series of trees of apps of metrics that ultimately should correlate to those two big metrics.
Thank you. So I think knowing that we are on a tight schedule here, I'm gonna actually skip few questions which I ideally wanted to ask. But let me jump into some rapid fire round with you. Are you prepared for that?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So who is your favorite entrepreneur?
I think it's Elon Musk for the
Okay.
obvious reasons.
So I can say my favorite entrepreneur is David Vélez.
Thank you, sir.
Uh, so IPO or private?
Private for as long as possible, but I think IPO makes sense at some point.
Okay.
Just don't rush into it.
One principle that you live by day in, day out.
Um, I think it's everything is around impact. I want to make sure that the time I'm using has impact.
Oh, definitely.
And so, either the questions I'm working on or the company I'm working on or the time I'm working on, I want to make sure that everything I do has some type of impact. So I always try to prioritize my agenda and my time based on that.
And what is your mantra for building a good team? Like, how do you approach building a good team?
Um, I think it begins by having homogeneity of vision. This means having consensus around the level of impact or a long-term orientation of what you want to be building. There's got to be consensus on that, because otherwise somebody's going to be optimizing for the short run, somebody's going to be optimizing for the long run. So you have to have similarity on the vision, but you need to have heterogeneity of experiences. You need to be based on diversity. A team that is fully homogeneous then everybody else is irrelevant, right? It's commoditized.
Right.
So it's about building a very diverse team and diversity in all dimensions, experiences, age, preferences, psychological differences, psychometric differences, because they're very diverse. If you have homogeneity of goal, which means everybody agrees on the goal, but you have diversity of opinions of how to get there, that environment is what really allows you to be creative and innovate. And so you need to have that environment of a constructive debate, of meritocracy of ideas.
Interesting. So, on the team, I have a question which I did not anticipate to ask, but I'm asking you. So, startup founders generally say that you should have all your team members below 40 if you are running a startup. Do you follow the same principle?
I wouldn't use that principle at all. I do think the profile of the founding team is different from the profile of the, let's say, growth stage team or mature stage team. But for the early stage team, I think what's most important is you have to be very scrappy. You have to be willing to work really hard. You have to be creative. You need to know a few things, but also ignore a lot of things. If you approach a startup thinking that you know everything, you're not going to be able to innovate. So because of that, sometimes you end up seeing very young founders. For somebody that has 40 years of experience doing banking, it's going to be very hard to question his own conventional wisdom. So given those attributes, you end up seeing very young teams. But as the company grows, you need to be adding a lot of experience, because that growth, that young team will need to have a lot of answers soon. And so experience is able to add that, to bring those point of views early on or quickly enough.
Got it. So, I think if you were to build Nubank again, let's say, and in hindsight is always you have the advantage of doing everything right. So, what would you do different?
Yeah, the big thing I would be very different is related to this. The last question is, I would have brought more experienced people earlier on in our lifetime. It took me too long to realize. Frankly, I underestimated the importance of experience, and that's what's hard about building these teams. I think you need this combination of ignorance and experience. You need ignorance because ignorance is a bliss. Ignorance lets you really question everything for first principle. If you
Right,
approach problems with, oh, I know already the answer, you're only going to get the answer that everybody gives. So the initial team, it's beginning with me, who had never done credit cards, or I'm not even Brazilian, was of finding people that had um, that could question all the first principle, that didn't have the experience, that could really question everything. But it took me too long, and I lost too many opportunities to bring great experience into a team, especially as we started to scale very, very quickly. And we went from a team of 10 people to 3,000 and 1,000 customers to 25 million. At some point, the complexity of that growth curve is so gigantic that no matter how smart you are, you're not going to be able to learn things over a weekend, regardless of how many
right.
books you read. And you just need to bring people that know this, that have done this before at scales that are bigger than anything you have seen.
Interesting. I think, David, your rapid fire questions were like really, really inspiring. I'm sensitive about your time. Can I take like 3 more minutes from you if you're okay with that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have few audience questions which have come, and I want to sort of specifically pick a couple of questions so that audience get to hear their answers. So Soumya and Shirish Lal, they have asked one very interesting question: should banks become a super app? What's your view on that?
I don't know. It's not an obvious question. There are a lot of pros in going in that direction. The obvious pros are the ability to serve more customers, more revenue, more engagement, more points of contact with the customer. There are a lot of cons, which means um, there is a lot of profit pools and there is a lot of value that you can provide to customer by doing the core banking offerings really, 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 really well. If you can be the best in the world at 4 to 6 banking products, you have a enormous, 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 enormous advantage, enormous company. So there's a school of thought that would say everything that detracts you from being the best at 4 to 5, 6 group, you should just not do. There is enough complexity on banking also around KYC, AML, audit, regulatory. There is just a lot of complexity there that you shouldn't take your eye from the focus. That being said, probably the right answer is probably somewhere in the middle. You
Got
want
it.
to make sure that you have the core incredibly well, and you probably want to offer a couple of really valuable solutions to their users that go beyond financial services to maintain that engagement. But building a full marketplace of super app, I struggle with what that means in terms of focus.
Got it. Interesting. So last audience question, David. This is Subhash Prajapati from Mumbai. He is asking, actually, it's a very tough question for you to answer. So the question is, what is the most loved feature of Nubank?
Wow, it's a great question. Lisa, I don't know if I know if there's one single one. What I could say is lack of fees immediately catches the eye. People love no fees. That's clear. There's no debate about that. So no fees is a great feature. But and that's one of the reasons for people come. But once you come, some of the things that people highlight the most is actually a customer service, is being able to talk to a human being that helps, and that is fast, and that you're not transferred to five different people in a call center, that you are able to establish a good relationship with somebody that really cares about you. Um, and then I would put another bucket of the entire app functionalities and just the usability of the app and the control that you can provide to the app. So I would categorize the bundle of that. I think is what makes the product special.
Wow, that's nice to hear that you continue to say that customer service, and how that is so important, which is the most ignored part when you, as a founder in banking things, you think more about cashbacks, rewards, beautiful card, but not customer service. So definitely, totally conquer. So while David, while you are just about to go, any advice you will leave for the founders and the young entrepreneurs who are on this community and call? Anything like some of the founders I know who are on this community are apparently making neobanks or creating fintech propositions. So any advice you will give them, and even give me as well?
Of course. Well, listen, a couple of things. I think the first one is um, try to try to really understand what is your unique solution to what problem. In our case, it was is this pain in financial services, and we were going to solve that with great customer focus. It seems like a simple thing, but that is the most important decision that you need to make initially, so that you can walk backwards and build an entire company underneath. Because related to that, then the second most important thing that I would go do, and then is you build a culture, a company culture that is aligned with that strategy. That means if your differentiation can be customer focused, you need to build a culture that is very excited about serving the customer. Uh, they're not necessarily right or wrong cultures. Is you need to have the right culture for the right strategy. So once you define that strategy, create the values of that culture. Once you build that culture, then everything follows. That culture allows you to hire the right type of team. The right type of team allows you to build the right type of product. So ultimately, your product is fully aligned to your team, which is fully aligned to your culture, which is fully aligned to your strategy. It all fits together. And so having a good understanding of all of that is super critical. And ultimately, I think really it begins at the core, the heart really is this culture, is this company culture. That part of the things I learned at Sequoia was that the culture of a company is set in the first 3 to 6 months with the first 10 employees. So those early days, those early moments, those early months are magical for you to build that company culture. I've heard often from entrepreneurs that say, I'm too busy to worry about the culture. Once we are successful and we grow, then I'll worry about that. And for whoever has kids, it's almost like saying, I'm too busy to educate my kid. By the time she turns 18, then I'll really worry about it. And it's like, forget it. It's too late, right? It's too late to change. It's too late to change path. The same thing happened with culture. So those initial conditions, those initial values, those initial set of agreements that you have with your founding team are incredibly important. You want to be very, very thoughtful about putting them together. One of the things I think we did well is I had two decks at the beginning of Nubank. I had the Nubank pitch deck, which had this is what we're going to build, and I had a culture deck. This is the culture that we're also going to build, and they're both went hand in hand. So anyway, those would be my advice.
No, really appreciate, David, your time. And I know we exceeded the scheduled time, but I want to really thank you for agreeing to come. We can't get enough of you There's still so many questions. Maybe I'll try to seek your time sometime later again. But so much to learn from you. I know you are in your family time right now. So,
Sorry, my little daughter is calling me.
so I want to thank you on behalf of Jupiter and its community, and really grateful to you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Jitendra, for the invite. It was a absolutely pleasure. I'm very excited about here, more about Jupiter and about the community, and hope to be in India maybe once the entire world goes back to normalcy.
Yeah. Thank you, David, again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good evening.